Middle East is facing its worst crisis in history as the conflict between Israel and Hamas rages on. The Iranian satellite organization Hezbollah has publicly announced its participation. The globe is on edge right now. Following this revelation, a top Hezbollah official promised that if Israel starts a ground invasion of Gaza, it will pay a severe price. According to the Hezbollah official, the terror group based in Lebanon is already at the heart of the conflict. The Hezbollah official went on to say that his Iranian-backed party, which is aligned with Hamas, is already influencing the conflict's outcome by warming the Lebanese-Israeli border and keeping 3 divisions of the Israeli army stationed in the north rather than preparing to battle in Gaza. These statements were made following the escalation of the conflict between Israel and Lebanon. The fighting on the Lebanese border has gotten worse as a result of these words. Both sides of Israel's northern border with Lebanon may hear the noises of combat. Sirens wailing throughout Israeli communities warn of the approach of rockets fired from Lebanon by the Hezbollah armed group. Fearing Israeli fire and the potential of another conflict, Lebanese civilians have deserted their communities. In reaction to today's border attacks, Israel's defense forces said its airplanes hit Hezbollah bunkers and observation sites in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah launched 6 anti-tank guided missiles into Israeli communities and military posts along the border today, injuring 3 people. Later in the day, 2 rockets and a drone were launched into northern Israel. A rocket strike from Lebanon injured 1 person moderately. He was airlifted to Rambam Hospital in Haifa, where he is being treated for non-life-threatening injuries. The exchange of fire between Israel and Lebanon roused Israeli officials. Tel Aviv and other central Israeli cities are hearing rocket sirens. So far, no impacts or injuries have been recorded. The Israel Defense Forces reported that 9 rockets were fired from Lebanon toward the Kiryat Shmona area of northern Israel less than an hour ago. The Iron Dome air defense system intercepted 4 of them, according to the Israel Defense Forces. 1 rocket fell in an open region within Kiryat Shmona, causing no injuries or damage. The Israel Defense Forces, on the other hand, stated they carried out a drone strike on a terrorist group hurling mortars from Lebanon in the Tel Termez area near Mount Dov in northern Israel. More anti-tank guided missiles were also fired from Lebanon, according to Israeli soldiers, hitting the northern towns of Metula, Malkiah, and Manura. According to the army, the launch locations were retaliated against with artillery fire, while an Israeli Defense Forces tank attacked 2 anti-tank guided missile launch stations in southern Lebanon. Following an attack on the northern village of Metula, a 3rd ATGM launch point was targeted. Following all of these incidents, sirens were heard in Kiryat Shmona and numerous adjacent towns. After half an hour of silence, Israel is currently showering more fire on its border with Lebanon than on the Gaza Strip. After all of this, Israeli troops are back on the move. According to the Israel Defense Forces, numerous more anti-tank guided missiles were launched from Lebanon into northern Israel. Lebanese rockets were most recently launched at Kibbutz Manura and Rosh Hanakra. The army retaliated by firing artillery at the source of the fire. Meanwhile, Israeli forces launched an offensive on Hezbollah strongholds in southern Lebanon. The authorities have reacted to the intensification of these conflicts. Iran has ordered its citizens to leave Lebanese territory within the next 24 hours. This warning follows similar statements from a number of other countries, and it is yet another sign of rising tensions in the region. According to experts, Israel is likely to start a larger fire in Lebanon in order to challenge the militant Hezbollah movement. Hezbollah in Lebanon is regarded as a greater threat to Israel than Hamas in Gaza. Given the current situation, Israel may have opted to undertake large-scale military operations against Hezbollah and seize control of specific sections of Lebanon. At least 20,000 Lebanese, Syrians, and Iranians have also been evacuated from villages near the Israeli border in southern Lebanon. In contrast, Israel has evacuated over 100,000 of its citizens from northern border towns in Lebanon. Following the evacuations, militants deployed a military outpost near the Lebanese border, which was struck by an anti-tank guided missile launched from Lebanon. As the number of attacks increases, the Israeli army is on high alert. The Israeli military did not reveal how many casualties they suffered in the current attack on the outpost. Soldiers replied with artillery fire at the missile launchers in southern Lebanon. The Israel Defense Forces launched a drone attack on another cell in southern Lebanon that was ready to conduct an anti-tank guided missile attack against the northern village of Zaret. The attack was Israel's third on a cell in southern Lebanon today, following multiple missile and rocket attacks by the Hezbollah militant group. Following all of these strikes, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with troops on Israel's northern border. During repeated battles on the Lebanese border, Netanyahu issued a warning to the Hezbollah terror group. During his visit to the military, Netanyahu made several statements. "I understand how painful it is for you to lose friends. But we're fighting for our lives. We are fighting for our home. This is not hyperbole. This is not hyperbole. This is warfare. Kill or be killed, they must be eliminated. If Hezbollah chooses to go to war, it will be unable to participate in the Second Lebanon War. It will have made the biggest blunder of its life. We'll hit it with a force it can't even comprehend. And the consequences for it and for Lebanon will be catastrophic." So, what role do Iran, Lebanon, and Hezbollah play in the conflict between Israel and Hamas? Many people feel that Iran is to blame for Hamas's deadly attack on southern Israel on October 7th. The prevailing opinion holds that any decision to open a second front against Israel in the north will be taken through its proxy armed force, Hezbollah. If this turns out to be true, Israel's fate may be heavily influenced by how much Iran invests in the so-called axis of resistance and its assessment of whether it will materialize. The assumption that Iran wants to escalate the conflict has grown in the aftermath of 3 missiles fired in recent days by Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, ostensibly intended for Israel. The Navy warship USS Carney intercepted these missiles in the Red Sea. Senior Hamas and Hezbollah officials told a U.S. newspaper that Iranian Revolutionary Guard officers have been working with Hamas since August and that a series of meetings in Beirut have included Iranian officers, Hamas representatives, and representatives from 3 other Iranian-backed militant groups. Some of the sessions were attended by Iranian Foreign Minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian, according to the article. According to a Hamas spokesman and Iranian diplomats, Hamas governs Gaza autonomously. Razemd, an Iran researcher at Tel Aviv's Institute for National Security Studies, believes that the truth falls somewhere in the middle of the two ideas. According to Razemd, Iran has been giving weaponry, training, and other technical know-how to Hamas for years. Hamas would not have been able to carry out this attack without their help, according to Zemd. In summary, Iran is thought to be controlling proxy terror groups in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and even Yemen. The skirmishes between Lebanon and Israel today have fueled fears that the conflict will spread. A battle of this magnitude would be dangerous for everyone involved. The conflict between Israel's defense forces and the terrorist organization Hamas continues. For quite some time, the Israeli military has been planning a ground offensive. The developments of today imply that the ground operation is approaching. In a separate visit earlier in the morning, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu informed soldiers stationed there that the entire Israeli country supports them and that they will administer a severe blow to the militants so that we can win victory. Major General Yaron Finkelman, commander of Israel Defense Forces warned soldiers on the other side of the border that the ground operation would be lengthy, arduous, and intense. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant addressed soldiers gathering near the Gaza Strip, emphasizing that the Israel Defense Forces have the best leaders and fighters. Gallant added that the soldiers will soon be able to observe the area from within. The same day, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu emphasized that his nation is up against an evil axis with Iran as its leader. Despite the fact that Iran's name is not publicly spoken in the Middle East's bleak atmosphere, multiple Iranian armed groups have carried out attacks in various locations in Israel. However, no intelligence service other than Israel's has reported on Iran's active engagement in Israeli attacks. As you may recall, the U.S. Sixth Fleet flagship, the USS Gerald Ford, and a half-dozen warships from its carrier group arrived on Israeli borders shortly after the conflict began. The U.S. Fifth Fleet increased its patrols in the Red Sea area of responsibility and was on high alert as the battle on the front lines reached a new phase. Around midday, a surprise attack on Israel started. According to U.S. sources, an U.S. Navy destroyer intercepted 3 missiles fired from Yemen and headed north. According to the official, the U.S. Navy destroyer USS Carney of the U.S. Fifth Fleet successfully intercepted the 3 missiles. According to Pentagon Press Secretary General Pat Ryder, the Navy warship USS Carney intercepted 3 ground assault cruise missiles and multiple drones launched by Houthi troops in Yemen. They were shot down over the ocean, he claims. In recent days, Yemeni Houthi militants supported by Iran have proclaimed solidarity for Palestinians and publicly threatened Israel. But there was a distinction. They were not assisting Palestine, but rather exacerbating the situation. Innocent Palestinians and Israelis are in this scenario as a result of terrorist attacks carried out by militant groups backed by Iran. We don't know for sure what these missiles and drones were aimed at, but they were launched from Yemen northward across the Red Sea, potentially towards Israeli locations, according to Ryder at the Pentagon briefing. Ryder stated that the missiles were shot down because they constituted a possible threat based on their flight profile and that the U.S. is willing to go to any length to secure its partners and interests in this critical region. He stated that the U.S. was still determining what the goal was. It is unclear whether Israel was targeted, but Israeli defense officials believe so, according to Hebrew media reports. According to one person, the U.S. does not believe the missiles were intended for the ship. The day's U.S. judgments in favor of Israel did not stop there. On October 7, just after Hamas militants attacked Israel, U.S. President Joe Biden stated that the U.S. would always support Israel. The United States Senate passed a resolution today denouncing Hamas attacks on civilians and expressing support for Israel and its right to self-defense. The resolution was co-sponsored by 99 senators out of 100. Only Senator Rand Paul, a Kentucky Republican, did not sign but later voted for it. The final vote count was 97-0, with 3 senators absent. The resolution also condemns Iran's support for global terrorism, including its support for terrorist organizations such as Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and states that the U.S. stands ready to assist Israel with its urgent needs for resupply or other security, diplomatic, or intelligence assistance. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer stated that the Senate will support this resolution with genuine, rapid, determined action and resources ahead of President Joe Biden's planned remarks calling on Congress to adopt a supplemental package providing aid to Israel before the vote. Schumer emphasized that October 7, 2023, will be regarded as a day of infamy and that while Israel faces the darkest hour in its 75-year history, the bipartisan resolution we are about to vote on states that the people of Israel will never be alone as long as the United States of America exists. Schumer stated that they support Israel's right to self-defense and condemn the barbaric and duplicitous acts carried out by the terrorist organization Hamas. Schumer stated that it is unusual for all 100 senators to agree on everything and that all 100 senators are united here today in stating that we support Israel. Meanwhile, New York Governor Kathy Hochul visited Kibbutz Kfar Aza, the location of some of Hamas's most heinous crimes. In the horrific October 7 attack, Hochul called the kibbutz she visited hell on earth. He stated that what the citizens of the area had to undergo would never be forgotten. The atrocities committed by the extremist group today will be remembered as a massacre of innocents, Hochul said. The governor of the United States' visits to Israel will not end there. Governor Gavin Newsom of California has announced a surprise trip to Israel. California Governor Gavin Newsom announced plans for a one-day trip to Israel to speak with war victims. the Democratic governor will come to Israel and depart on the same day. The governor's office did not specify where he would be visiting in its announcement. California, according to his office, will send medical supplies to the region, including the Gaza Strip. According to the Arab American Institute, California has the nation's largest Arab American population. According to the American Jewish Population Project at Brandeis University, it also boasts the second greatest Jewish population in the United States. In addition to all of this, the Israeli embassy in Washington joyfully declared that Israelis now have the ability to travel to the United States without a visa. Previously, the United States welcomed Israel to the visa waiver program on September 27, but it was expected that it would take up to 2 months for the required measures to be put in place for Israelis to begin taking advantage of the electronic system for travel authorization. Following the humanitarian catastrophe in Israel, American officials were able to complete their preparations well in advance, allowing the announcement to be made today. Following this judgment, Israeli individuals with biometric passports will be permitted to travel to the United States by submitting an ESTA application up to 72 hours before their journey. They will be able to enter the United States for up to 90 days for business or pleasure. As a result, the U.S. has expanded its backing for Israel several times since the beginning of the war. To secure Middle Eastern prosperity, violent groups in the region must be fully eradicated, and those who sponsor them must face severe punishment. As the Israeli Defense Forces make headway toward this aim, the assistance that the U.S. is now providing is crucial. The ground operation that Israeli soldiers will conduct soon will be the final step before achieving this goal. Israeli forces are fully prepared in the border area, and this operation might begin as soon as tomorrow. The entire elimination of militant nests in Gaza will serve as a significant lesson for other militant groups. The U.S. will continue to back the Israeli Defense Forces until they achieve this aim, and the Middle East's significant security crisis will be resolved. Meanwhile, Israeli forces must tread carefully and firmly. Middle Eastern tensions are escalating quicker than expected. According to statements made by senior Israeli Defense Forces officials, tensions in the Gaza Strip will peak in the coming days. Since the conflict began on October 7, terrorist Hamas militants have fired more than 7,400 missiles at Israel. Israel's top generals have frequently stated that the Israeli army will humiliate Hamas militants. The Israel Defense Forces carried out a wave of airstrikes against dozens of Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip, according to footage from unmanned aerial vehicles. Rockets and missiles launched by Israeli artillery, tanks, fighter jets, and drones are destroying many Hamas-occupied buildings in Gaza. Aside from the structures, Israeli air attacks have targeted cars and, in particular, underground cells identified as belonging to Hamas terrorists. The Israeli Defense Forces are using airstrikes to reduce the prospect of opportunistic attacks by anti-Israel militants from Israeli towns and cities, as well as to create ideal conditions for ground operations. The Israeli Defense Forces attack on Hamas sites in Gaza was in response to a Hamas attack on Israeli forces earlier in the day. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, continue to carry out local incursions in Gaza. Israeli forces conduct local raids to clear the area of terrorists while seeking Israelis kidnapped by Hamas militants and the remains of missing Israelis. The top spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, reported earlier today that 1 soldier was killed and 3 were injured when Hamas attacked soldiers conducting local raiding operations along the Gaza border. The Hamas terrorist organization claimed responsibility for the incident. According to the IDF, Hamas militants fired an anti-tank guided missile at an Israeli tank and engineering vehicle operating near the southern village of Kisafim on the western side of the border barrier. The operation was part of the army's search for the bodies of missing Israelis, and it aimed to clear the area for Israel's upcoming ground offensive in the Gaza Strip. Prior to any major ground offensive in the Gaza Strip, Israeli forces are likely to increase artillery and airstrikes in the Gaza Strip, as well as naval operations in nearby coastal waters. During any significant ground attack in Gaza, the IDF is also likely to use combined arms tactics. Tanks provide mobile, protected firepower and are thus crucial, yet, tanks must be accompanied by infantry to provide protection against anti-tank weaponry. In such a densely populated area, indirect artillery fire must be coordinated closely with ground forces. Meanwhile, engineers will be continuously requested to clear obstacles, build rapid defensive positions, and provide combined arms forces with a breaching capability. However, as crucial as combined weapons operations are when fighting in cities, they are equally difficult to carry out. Since October 16, 2023, Israel has continued to send troops, tanks, and military vehicles to the Gaza border in the Israeli city of Darrow. During the war, Israel called up over 360,000 reservists, the majority of whom were deployed to locations surrounding the Gaza Strip in preparation for a possible ground invasion. Darrow and other Israeli villages near the Gaza Strip were evacuated. The Israeli army has delineated and closed military sectors surrounding the Gaza Strip, as well as an isolated 5-kilometer stretch of the northern Israel-Lebanon border, preventing public access. Herzi Halevi, Chief of Staff of the Israel Defense Forces, informed commanders that the army would commence an operation to eradicate Hamas. Herzi Halevi, Chief of Staff of the Israel Defense Forces, met with the IDF's Golani Brigade. Despite the fact that the Golani Brigade is an Israeli military infantry brigade affiliated with Northern Command, the brigade was deployed in the south upon the outbreak of the conflict before entering office on January 16, 2023. Herzi Halevi was the commander of the Israeli Southern Command while serving as Chief of Staff of the Israel Defense Forces. Herzi Halevi, Chief of Staff, stated, "You will have the complete capabilities of the Israel Defense Forces alongside you in this maneuver. With this mindset, be brave and determined. Give your soldiers confidence." This was perceived as a motivational speech prior to the start of the ground operation. On October 7, the IDF's Golani Brigade clashed with Hamas fighters who had entered Israel via various routes. Despite suffering heavy losses during the initial offensive, the brigade swiftly recovered and took its place on the border with Gaza. As the anticipated ground offensive by Israeli soldiers approached, the U.S. and its partners delivered strong warnings to Israel, according to U.S. and Western officials. The U.S. and its allies have warned Israel that if it conducts a ground invasion of Gaza, it must be unambiguous about its strategy and aims, avoid a prolonged occupation, and put a special priority on avoiding civilian casualties. Western defense officials have made it clear in private contacts with their Israeli counterparts that they are not attempting to discourage Israel from entering Gaza with ground soldiers. They emphasize, however, that Israel must have defined objectives in order to humiliate Hamas and avoid a long-term occupation of the Gaza Strip. A NATO defense minister assured the Israeli military that they would not be told not to go after Hamas because they fully accept their right to do so. According to the defense minister of a NATO member state, under this situation, wherever Hamas militants are, the Israeli army must go after them. The defense minister, on the other hand, emphasized that Israeli forces must have a strategy, not just a tactical maneuver. The defense minister stated that they expect Israel to act in accordance with international humanitarian law, but that they are dealing with an adversary. President Joe Biden had the same sentiment. According to Biden, the removal of extremists is a must for Israel. While emphasizing that Hamas and its radical components do not represent the entire Palestinian people, Biden stated that another Israeli invasion of Gaza would be a mistake. An Israeli official confirmed that these discussions with the U.S. and other partners are going on. According to a senior Israeli official, Israel is aware of the humanitarian issues and is working to resolve them in collaboration with the U.S. government. According to the top Israeli source, Hamas has converted 2 million Gazans into human shields. At least officially, Israeli authorities have only detailed their plans in broad strokes, stating that the goal is to eliminate Hamas and its infrastructure. U.S. authorities are unsure of Israel's goals in Gaza and believe that completely eliminating Hamas will be tough, according to Israel's Chief of Staff, Herzi Halevi. Our mission now is to enter Gaza, to go to the locations where Hamas organizes, operates, plans, and launches, and to hit them hard everywhere, every commander, every agent, and to demolish the infrastructure. In a nutshell, to win given all of this information, we believe that Israel's ground operation is only a matter of time. The rise in tensions indicates how much time is left for ground operations. Israeli soldiers will face significant difficulties in the Gaza Strip. As previously said, the airstrikes on Gaza will provide Israeli forces with a more comfortable advantage in the following days. Thank you for taking the time to watch.